put some protections in place that protect consumers, but work really hard not to stifle innovation because there's so much possibility there that the government can't even imagine or dream of. So trying to regulate in a way that stifles is antithetical to our state's interest and then U.S. interests as well. And the solution there is the Wyoming stable token, where the state of Wyoming issues the Wyoming stable token, and we specifically call it a token, not a coin. The reason being it's not the asset of value, but it is representative of a U.S. dollar held in trust by the state of Wyoming on behalf of the token holder, and so it can be redeemed by $1.
Welcome to another episode of Exploring Prosperity. Today we have the honor of speaking with Senator Chris Rothfuss, the minority leader in the Wyoming State Senate and a trailblazer in blockchain regulation. Senator Rothfuss has played a pivotal role in passing over 40 bills through the Wyoming legislature, establishing a strong legal framework for blockchain-based commercial activities. His work has been transformative, attracting innovation and entrepreneurial ventures to the state's economy. The influence of these initiatives reaches well beyond Wyoming's borders. Other states and foreign governments are seeking his advice because Wyoming is a model for blockchain and digital regulation. Wyoming is now exploring new challenges, building off this solid foundation in blockchain law, drafting legislation to address issues like AI deepfakes, and utilizing blockchain encryption to enhance identity authentication and the protection of individual privacy. Senator Rothfuss, thanks so much for joining me. And why don't we start by hearing about your progress to date and the barriers that you've had to work to overcome?
Yeah, I think from the perspective of digital assets and what we've been working on, I think we've built an incredible ecosystem, and we're seeing a lot of interest. We're seeing a lot of companies looking at Wyoming, potentially relocating to Wyoming or starting up in Wyoming, and that's exactly what we've been trying to work on and create is that ecosystem through the Blockchain Select Committee. I hope that continues, and we'll continue with the work to try and overcome some of the barriers that we currently have. We're fighting with the federal government over some regulatory concerns, obviously related to our special purpose depository institution, Custodia. So far, our problems really have been the federal government. I think we've done an excellent job internally of gathering the support that's necessary. That doesn't mean things are easy, right? When you're trailblazing in policy, it's a lot of work to try to get things right and to figure out how to provide appropriate consumer protections, how to appropriately regulate in a way that provides incentives for innovation, that enables industry to develop and flourish, while at the same time having appropriate protections and sideboards and regulations so that you don't have bad actors doing bad things. That's always been our mission in Wyoming. We call it regulate to enable rather than regulate to restrict. And we've been successful at that and really have built this tremendous ecosystem on digital assets that provides a platform to do just about everything that industry and stakeholders want to get done. And if there's something that we're missing, honestly, we typically hear from stakeholders. They reach out to us knowing that we're active in this space, and then we try and find solutions and work through the select committee to create that solution and create legislation to enable that solution, which is very empowering. The challenges that we have really are federal challenges, whether it's the SEC and dealing with securities law and the lack of clarity therein, and trying to provide bright line opportunities for people to operate in the state of Wyoming, but recognizing that if they're doing anything that is even tangentially linked to the securities realm, then the SEC is obviously beyond our control, not something we can work with. And then when we get into the banking side of things, we've really struggled with the Federal Reserve and getting them on board. We know that some of the problems that even led to the existence of the Speedy Bank have come from the FDIC and their Operation Choke Point 1 and 2, where they've basically limited access to traditional banking for any digital asset, cryptocurrency, or blockchain related business entities. So yeah, our struggles are not as much internal as they are external and federal in nature. And we've been fortunate along those lines, right? We've had very good people working on this in the state of Wyoming, a bipartisan, multi-chamber approach to the legislature. Governor Gordon now and previously Governor Mead were very supportive of our efforts, recognizing the value of this innovative industry in the state of Wyoming. So we've had incredible partners, and we continue to partner even at the federal level, obviously, with Senator Cynthia Lummis and her office. She's been a champion of digital assets. So we feel like we've got a great team, as good of a team as you can have in the state of Wyoming, working to move this forward in a nonpartisan way, but struggle against the federal government and some of the interests that they show. And have shown, honestly, regardless of which administration we're talking about, right? We struggled under the Trump administration. We're struggling under the Biden administration. And, hopefully we'll be more successful under the next administration.
Yeah. It was very disappointing, the lawsuit that I should remember whether it was Custodia Bank that was the loan challenger, or whether the state of Wyoming was involved in that appeal to overturn the St. Louis Fed's decision to disallow the master account.
Yeah, so it is Custodia is the bringer of the suit and the appeal, but the state of Wyoming has weighed in with a brief, and again, we put together a good team. The Senator Lummis's office has coordinated other briefs, filed one. So again, we have good support for it from the state coming together and really trying to ensure that we're successful there. And this is bigger than just the state of Wyoming. This is about the two-tiered banking system, where theoretically the federal chartered banks and state chartered banks are co-equal in that two-tiered system. This is a demonstration where some are more equal than others in the eyes of the Federal Reserve and really the federal regulators overall. That's unacceptable. That's a violation of the federal law that guides state chartered banks and gives them equal access to banking markets. But this is the bias that we've traditionally seen, where the large financial institutions that are typically federally chartered banks seem to control who gets to win and who ends up losing. And when they see a threat to their business model, where innovative banking structures, new types of charters like our Speedy Banks, are deemed a threat, then they work with their friends, the regulators, to shut those things down. So it's funny to see when one of these friendly banks wants to do something with digital assets, a nationally chartered bank, all of a sudden their friends are willing to let it pass. But in a circumstance where you have a state chartered bank like Custodia, Avanti, they're happy to shut it down because it protects their friends. And that's a disappointing process, disappointing way to have the system operate. But it sure seems to be that type of a network where it's not a level playing field under any circumstance.
Well, Nick Carter's most recent update on the choke point 2.0 was quite shocking.
This show is being brought to you by our sponsor, Truflation. Professional investors and economists, and probably any casual observers, know that government inflation statistics are only an approximation of what real inflation is. Not only that, but the government has a conflict of interest because high inflation can be so damaging to the economy, the deficit, and our $34 trillion in debt. Truflation collects over 13 million pricing data points. Most are updated daily to reveal inflation with precision for asset managers, governments, companies, and the general public. Check them out at truflation.com.
And I am hopeful that it may lead to enough embarrassment amongst the regulators, or worse, that they at least stop coordinating, and that you at least start opening the transparency a little bit so that it'll be much more difficult for regulators to work beyond their authority to target industries like it appears was done according to that really impressive write-up.
Yeah, they're definitely going beyond their mission, and that's disappointing. As I mentioned, in Wyoming, we regulate to enable. We have our own regulators, obviously, as any state does. I serve on the Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee, which oversees our Department of Environmental Quality. And they regulate a tremendous amount of activity in the state of Wyoming, but they don't do it in this way where they're trying to create political and social control and shut things down without explanation. They're very interactive. They try to get you compliant. They work with businesses in the state of Wyoming to find a path to compliance if something is going wrong. It's not just you receive an angry letter and then all of a sudden you can't do business anymore. And that's the way it should be. Most businesses are trying to be good actors, and good actors should be able to succeed. It shouldn't be the regulatory structure that holds them back if they want to be compliant. The regulators should be allowed and able to focus on those that are being bad actors. And we've seen those, obviously, in crypto and digital assets. We see them all the time. With regard to our Department of Environmental Quality right there out there, and you want to make sure that you have tools to stop bad actors from doing harm to the community, the state, the people. But it's not their mission to just shut business down and to stop innovation. And when they feel like it is, then they've certainly gone beyond their scope, and something needs to be done. And again, we've seen that for years. People like to make this partisan at this point in time. Everyone wants to say, well, that side did it and this side did it. From my perspective, when it comes to digital assets, we've seen the federal government acting as an inappropriate gatekeeper for as long as I've been involved in this policy space. And that's been, I guess we're up to about 8 or 9 years now that's been the case. And it's very disappointing. It's a case study in what's already been going on. I honestly don't think it's necessarily new. It's just that we're now shining a light on it.
And perhaps these things have happened over time, but this one seems particularly egregious and arbitrary, to just pick an industry, and especially one where it's there are so many people that believe that it is a very important new technology. When we spoke last, you were working with some of the other states, and I'm curious whether that collaboration has picked up, improved. Are there more states becoming involved and seeking your advice and guidance, or has it actually waned a little bit?
I don't think it's picked up. I don't think it's calmed down. We end up with good engagements with other states where they call and want to know how we did things, and then they'll look to our legislation. What actually has picked up is probably our engagement with other countries, where now the state of Wyoming is very much on the digital asset radar, and so we're hearing from embassies and consulates of other countries that want to understand what we're doing and how we've done it. And having that pick up is definitely a good sign that the global community is now really trying to get engaged in good governance of digital assets and to coordinate it. So that's a positive. With regard to our Wyoming stable token project, I know that Anthony Apollo, who's the executive director of the Wyoming Stable Token Commission, he has had a tremendous amount of interest from and engagement with other states, other governments, and we're seeing a lot of outreach in that space at this point in time. Probably the most because it's in its energetic startup phase right now, where there's a tremendous amount of outreach. And now that outreach has shifted to inreach, which is a good sign. That means that we're meeting that critical mass point where people are calling us instead of us calling them. So that's an area where we're expecting a lot of really positive collaboration is on the stable token.
Is there a commonality or a consistent reason that various countries are reaching out to you to learn about what you've done? I'm actually kind of curious whether it is in anticipation of or a reaction to Americans moving offshore to pursue their technology ideas without this regulatory constraint of the United States.
And they're very aware of that. And, folks in the EU are facing similar challenges due to their regulations. So they're trying to get things right there. And we did the same thing when we started back in, I'll say 2017, 18 timeline, and we were trying to figure out what the appropriate regulatory structure looks like. The first thing you do is you look around both the country and then the world, and you figure out who's already doing this, how are they doing it, what rules do they have in place, what laws are in place, what are best practices. So we looked to Europe, to Switzerland, to Liechtenstein, even to, at the time, the United Kingdom had some early work and some good thought leadership. And so some of our community reached out to start those conversations, to learn what they were doing and to build off of some of those ideas. And now it's getting to the point where we've done so much, having passed, over 40 bills related to it and really built an incredible foundation in digital assets. Other countries are recognizing as they do the same thing we did, look around who's actually doing this right. We're sufficiently on the map that they end up hearing about whether it's us directly in the state or whether they end up engaging with Senator Lummis at the federal level, contacting her office. We end up in a conversation with them about how we're governing digital assets. Senator Lummis's work with Senator Gillibrand, right? Good bipartisan work trying to create a foundation at the federal level for digital assets that does just what we're doing, trying to regulate to enable, has gotten a lot of international attention as well. So I think that's part of what's bringing attention to the state of Wyoming is as other countries are looking to how the United States is going to be regulating this in the long run through legislation, then they inevitably end up being exposed to the Lummis-Gillibrand Act related to digital assets, and they're working on stable token legislation. So there's a lot going on at the federal level, but most of that federal work then is tied back to what we're doing at the state. So we end up having conversations as well with them, and it's great to have this network being built and the positive stakeholders that want to have a successful future in Web3 space and digital assets come together and make sure that the communication channels are open.
Are there any states that have taken a different approach than the one that you found and other states were replicating?
I don't believe so. I mean, the only one when you said that comes to mind was obviously the BitLicense approach by New York in the early days where they went a different way than we went. Other than the BitLicense aspect, a lot of it's coming back together. New York is now much more dynamic and active in digital asset space, and they're not doing anything that deviates really from the policy that we have. The Uniform Law Commission obviously took up digital asset under Uniform Commercial Code, and even though the language isn't identical to what we did, the foundation of the law is the same as what we did. So they basically reworked our 2019 legislation into uniform law, which then other states are now moving towards and adopting. And that will then create a common treatment for digital assets, which is appropriate. And you'll recall from our previous conversation that the original Uniform Law Commission legislation that they put forward, told states to adopt, was rubbish. It was exactly the wrong direction. So we rejected their approach, did our own, had a little battle with the Uniform Law Commission for a while, and I think they ended up understanding that our path was the appropriate path with a better understanding of digital assets. And honestly, when they brought in legal experts on digital assets, and they did end up putting together a great team to develop that uniform law, those folks that were much more deeply exposed to digital asset law understood that the right direction was how we were managing those digital assets as intangible personal property, and that you have direct control, you effectively own it.
They yielded. They bent the knee.
They did. They did.
And then adopted it, accepted, and progressed.
Absolutely. And everyone fortunately is sort of on the same page there. Nobody else is pushing back. So that great work that we did back in 2019, and again, that was bipartisan. Senator Chair Nethercott was the prime sponsor on that legislation. She's been on the select committee since the beginning. Tyler Lindholm, Ogden Driscoll, and I worked on that. Caitlin Long, Matt Kaufman from the task force at the time, we're all a part of that. So it was a great piece of work. And it's one that doesn't get as much attention as it should, but it really is the foundation for digital asset law. It's the unsexy, no awesome talking points. Nobody ever gets enthused about uniform commercial code and property law unless you're really wonky. But it is the key to whether you can have an appropriate regulatory structure associated with digital assets. You have to have the underlying law, and the courts need to know how to treat digital assets when it comes to property law. So that's an important piece of foundation work that we put a lot of time and energy into, and then ended up iterating through a series of revisions to get it right.
It is. It's that necessary blocking and tackling that it doesn't get any of the headlines.
Exactly, but you've got to have an offensive line, right?
Back to the state of Wyoming, I remember that they were involved through the governor's office in pursuing lawsuits against the federal government. Would you mind reminding me what those were, how they related to Custodia, and that effort? Because I thought that was the driving force of it. And then I lost track of whether there were two paths or one path in the lawsuit and in the appeal, which was filed recently, right?
So,
and
there was
what are the legal paths that Wyoming is pursuing?
There was a separate filing by the state, concurrent, I'll say, with Custodia. That was dismissed by the court as moot because the state's rights in the eyes of the court were not being challenged, only Custodia's was. So the state of Wyoming then filed an amicus brief on behalf of Custodia and also filed one in the appeal. So the state is not a direct party currently in a lawsuit. They are a friend of the plaintiff in this lawsuit. Now, we have legislation that we're putting forward in the upcoming legislative session trying to provide the state with clear, strong standing to file its own lawsuits on behalf of the dual banking system rather than having to join a plaintiff through an amicus brief. And the intent there is to allow the state to directly represent its own interests instead of having to support the interests of one of our financial institutions, which is the way that we would prefer it to be going forward. So we're trying to do that through some clarifying legislation. There's no guarantee that will be successful, but you can see the intent is to put the state of Wyoming in a better position to be defending its two-tiered banking system against inappropriate regulation.
Is it true that other states would file amicus briefs on behalf of Wyoming to make sure that the federal government was not trouncing on their territory as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you have other states out there that, while they haven't risen to the same level of concern that we're at, they are seeing and having concern related to the fact that they're being pushed out through federal regulators favoring federally chartered banks, their friends, relative to state chartered banks. So I do think that there would be a good consortia of support among other states that are experiencing similar challenges.
And is um, the jurisdiction established, or can it be found? Many lawsuits have no chance in one jurisdiction, good chances in others. I was surprised at the ruling that denied the master account and upheld the Fed's action to block it.
We're in a good circuit. We're in the right circuit, and there actually is precedent within the circuit. I think it is the only circuit that has precedent that is supportive of the Custodia lawsuit. As a result, this is hopefully the correct forum. Now, as the appeal goes forward, right, there's some consideration for the first part of it, which of the judges within the circuit end up reviewing that. So you've got a little bit of luck there.
Yeah.
But I know that we feel pretty good about where the court has been in the past, and are hopeful that they'll be supportive and understanding of the needs here. And I agree. I was surprised. I was surprised with the final decision, particularly because of the denial for summary judgment so clearly favored Custodia, and it's almost as if everything that was written in the denial for summary judgment was forgotten in the judgment that was made to allow for the Fed to deny the master account. So
yeah, it seemed that way to me too.
We'll see.
How about the Democratic Party going into this election? If Kamala Harris winds up winning, do you have any insight into what's going on with the thinking about crypto? Because and I'll use crypto, that's really not the right word for it, but digital technology, we'll call it. Is there any hope that different people will take over the thinking about regulation, or that the coordination winds up being exposed and reduced or eliminated?
I do believe things will improve. I believe the Harris camp understands the concerns and understands the need to have more flexibility within the digital asset space. I don't think that they will hold to the current administration's approach, and I'm hopeful and believe that even on the SEC side, we'll see some substantial improvement, as well as on the Treasury and Federal Reserve side. This is an area where I will definitely reach out. I know that Senator Lummis's office is reaching out, but it definitely has been a case where you have a group within the current administration that is very anti-digital asset, but at the same time, that isn't necessarily reflective, certainly, of broader Democratic Party principles. Obviously, I'm a Democrat. I'm the minority leader in the Wyoming legislature. Democrats are strongly supportive around the country of digital assets and understand the value of it. Republicans are as well. It just is, which group do you have at any given time? We could have the same challenges, and we do, with Republicans that are large financiers currently working in financial institutions become the the gatekeepers, and we had that under the Trump administration where they shut down digital assets as strongly as they could as well. And under the previous Trump administration, obviously, the president at the time was dismissive of and insulting of digital assets, including Bitcoin, and we see that change, but that change is largely a political change. At this point in time, I have no reason to believe that a Harris administration would be more restrictive, but I also believe that with Senator Gillibrand working with Senator Lummis in this incredible bipartisan way, and we also see bipartisan support in the House where they've formed a good coalition.
It's even louder and stronger in the House.
We're going to end up doing well because this is literally Congress's job, right? And it's a struggle because we know Congress doesn't often do their job. But when you get a bipartisan coalition on a topic, then they can actually get something done. And so we're also very hopeful that we'll just end up with some pretty good legislation in place. And we know that Senator Lummis and Senator Gillibrand, who are recognized as leaders in this space, will be protecting the industry as any legislation moves forward. They've got it well in hand. So I'm happy with that. And honestly, it's a real blessing because you look around any other topic you can think of that you're passionate about, and you look at where Congress needs to get some work done and how it's all fraught with infighting and there's no common ground and everyone's taken their team and they've gone to their corners and they're ready to fight over it. It's so refreshing to see a bipartisan coalition formed in both chambers that actually gets it right, that knows how it's supposed to be and is pushing towards that and is protecting these opportunities. So, yeah, I'm very hopeful. I think that we're going to be doing all right within the next couple of years. I'm always very hopeful, though, so maybe maybe part of that's on me. But we've been working on this for many years, and I see the challenges, but I see the paths towards solution, and it is going to take personnel changes, but those will take place at the tops of these entities, regardless of what administration moves in.
Well, if you look at the Republican Party as an example, it took a long time for the right people with the knowledge and the ability to sell to get close enough to the decision makers to have the 20-minute discussion where the decision maker says, okay, now I get it.
Right.
And, it's not as if President Trump has gathered much credibility in actually understanding anything about it. But I also think that it is credible when he says, I get it, and I want to make sure that we're a country that leads in this field.
Yeah. And that's important.
It does seem like a matter of time.
It's very important. And again, though, you have powerful and persuasive resistance that is coming from the large traditional financial institutions, and they have incredible political sway. They are good at what they do. They make a lot of money while the rest of us sleep, and they want to continue to do it in that manner. So they're the ones that are pushing back effectively and sowing mistrust and distrust within both political parties. They do it very well. And then they are also capable of getting themselves political appointments that allow them to be in positions where they can shut things down. And they do that very well. So there has to be some political will. Somebody has to be watching for that. In the past, both the Trump administration and the Biden administration, there weren't enough eyes on it. There weren't enough people in the Senate bipartisan, in the House bipartisan that were supporting this to actually be paying attention and ask the right questions during confirmation hearings. What are you going to do? Tell me about digital assets, right? That wasn't on the radar. Nobody's going to be as easily fooled at this point.
Yeah, and frankly, the education level was very low up until very recently, maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
Before that, it was really, when you can get an appointment and the right people go in to explain it, then you got your 10-minute chance and you're out. And it just didn't land. But eventually it caught on.
Yep, absolutely.
I also am encouraged because it doesn't seem like a lot of the legislation that has been written in the House or the Senate has a lot of controversy in it. It's pretty straightforward.
Right.
We need to protect people from frauds, and we need to protect the innovation that our citizens can bring to the the technology.
I know in particular in Senator Lummis's office, they're trying to protect innovation and ensure that nothing goes into the bills that stifle our ability at the state level to continue to be innovators and to continue to move things forward. So I don't think they're looking for a top-heavy solution. I think they're looking for some flexibility that provides protection from things like Terra Luna and FTX, and so that you have to have somebody with eyes on the assets and an understanding that there are assets there. But we do that in Wyoming, right? We have that and have had that for a number of years, and that's good. We want to make sure that nobody's getting rug pulled. But at the same time, much like the internet, you think about governance of the internet. Put some protections in place that protect consumers, but work really hard not to stifle innovation, because there's so much possibility there that the government can't even imagine or dream of. So trying to regulate in a way that stifles is antithetical to our state's interest and then U.S. interest as well. We need to make sure that we're nimble. And I know that they're sensitive to that, and that Senator Gillibrand is sensitive to that as well. So we've got a good team.
In Wyoming, you have the basics established for blockchain innovation. What are the next big projects that the legislature has a responsibility to put in place?
Yeah. So right now, we've got a few different, we think of them as puzzle pieces. We've got a few different puzzle pieces that are coming into place. We've been working obviously on DAOs and DUNAs so that we can have integration of smart contracts and Web3 capabilities into corporate structures and unincorporated associated structures so that people can work in this space and do it effectively and legally. So that's an area where we're going to continue to work. DUNAs just came online in July, and we're very excited about that. So that's an area where we're going to keep monitoring, and we'll probably grow. We'll see what other interests come along and what we have to change to maintain that flexibility, but we've got that piece nicely in place. Obviously, on the banking and finance side, we've had that in place for a number of years, but we're continuing to fight these battles to enable. On the horizon, we've got legislation in place for the Wyoming stable token. That will hopefully be released in Q1 2025. That is a big puzzle piece, because that solves the challenge of how can the state of Wyoming meaningfully engage in digital asset space and Web3 space so that we can make the lives of our people here in the state easier. Well, what would people want to do? They'd want to be able to pay their bills, pay their taxes. They'd want to be able to engage and transact with the state with a digital asset seamlessly, transparently, and with little or no cost. Automate transactions, right? That's really empowering if you want to work with the state, right? We have a tremendous amount of oil and gas. Wouldn't it be nice if severance tax on the oil and gas was paid immediately upon production, instantaneously through smart contract? Wouldn't it be nice if your sales and use tax as you're a food truck driving down the street is immediately automatically remitted to the state so you don't have to fill out the paperwork, which is annoying and tedious, right? There's a lot that can be done. And the question then a few years ago was, well, all right, how do we get to that point? How do we get to the point where we have confidence so that we could take a digital asset remitting payment for taxes or anything else? And the solution there is the Wyoming stable token, where the state of Wyoming issues the Wyoming stable token, and we specifically call it a token, not a coin. The reason being it's not the asset of value, but it is representative of a U.S. dollar held in trust by the state of Wyoming on behalf of the token holder, and so it can be redeemed by a dollar. Well, you can imagine if the state of Wyoming is holding the underlying dollar, then we could have a lot of confidence that the Wyoming stable token is going to maintain its value, and therefore we can have the trust that we need. So that's going to solve a lot of problems. And there's been tremendous interest in it because we are meeting not just the needs of our own state, but we will be meeting the needs of a lot of both industry and other states to have a coin that they can interact with and transact in, where they know that the dollars will be there if they want to turn it back into dollars. So we're very excited about that. That enables a lot.
It sure does. It also allows a lot of the supporters, whether they're individuals or entities like other states, to express their support by parking dollars in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then they can transact in that space also. And we know that there's a tremendous amount of interest. Two other areas we're really working on that are challenging, and I wish we were further down the road, but they integrate other pieces, is getting a fully enabled digital identity system. Obviously, voluntary, you want to participate to whatever extent you want to participate, but allowing interaction between businesses, organizations, and individuals through an authenticated state entity that can cryptographically sign and acknowledge that you are a person or you are a business. And yes, we will offer an opportunity to post your public keys if you're a business or whatever else, so that we can help to facilitate as a state Web3 type transactions that need a bona fide credential authenticator. And you might not need that, but you might. And again, you get to concepts like KYC AML. One of our dreams has always been absolute portability of KYC AML, where some banking institution does KYC AML on a customer. They then are a trusted partner with us, and they can then attest to the KYC AML, cryptographically sign that, and then we can have that as something that we integrate and provide an electronic verification, credentialing for that individual, so that they don't have to, they basically get to the point where they've got zero knowledge proof capacity for KYC AML compliance. What a wonderful thing. Turns out that doesn't comport really well with the Bank Secrecy Act, so we've looked into it, and there would probably need to be some more flexibility there to allow us to get to that point. But those are the types of concepts where we would like to have that fully integrated business and individual digital identity compliance system in the state of Wyoming. So we're building towards that, and you can see how that would then integrate with the state having the Wyoming stable token, and you basically build out an ecosystem where a state is capable of fully engaging in the benefits of the Web3 space and providing a validation platform for zero knowledge proofs so that people can then improve their privacy, right? So we're doing it from an improved privacy standpoint.
And there have been a number of people walking through Congress talking about AI impersonators, and this would directly affect that, and it allows for the solution to that problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you have validators at that point, and we've been talking about this for years, we've been talking about AI, but we will get to the point in the not so distant future where all videos are keyed and cryptographically signed on a keyframe basis so that you know that it's an authentic video. So you have to have the capacity then to have authenticators out there that can attest that, yes, this key is Chris Rothfuss or whoever else, and that's truly an authentic video. They've signed it on a keyframe basis. So
it sounds like your reference to the Bank Secrecy Act is actually a hurdle, and maybe that's the backdoor way of getting Congress to fix the Bank Secrecy Act so that it could allow for this authentication.
And you can have much better authentication, and you can do it more robust. If you don't have to have a full KYC AML for every single transaction, but you can have one high-quality KYC AML event, and then at that point, you end up having a portable KYC, how incredibly empowering. It would dramatically reduce the costs of KYC AML, and those costs are obviously passed along to customers. So it's not like the banks are taking it out of their pocket. They're raising their fees so that they can pay for KYC because it's required by the federal government. So this is good for the consumer if we get to the point where we have it. And zero-knowledge proofs allow privacy protection in a way that we've never seen before, and that's something Wyoming's very excited about, is getting to the point where we can maybe have some privacy again.
Am I wrong to? It sounds like you guys are way out in front on all of this as a state.
We are, but I'll tell you, from a legislative standpoint, these are real challenging things to write up. Industry hates privacy. Government hates privacy. Everyone seems to hate privacy. Everyone wants their own privacy, but every organization wants you not to have privacy. So this is a struggle, and this is a place where we've worked hard and haven't come up with as much work product as we would like. So this is one where I would invite people to reach out and try and get involved with our process with good ideas. We've had great conversations with incredible stakeholders, but I would like to be further down that path than we are right now. We do have some legislation under consideration this year, but again, this is an iterative process. It's going to take some time to get to the point where we have it. And we really need to build that cryptographic signature platform, preferably through the Secretary of State's office in the state of Wyoming, so that we can enable a lot of the other privacy aspects that we need. So again, putting the foundation in place before we can actually achieve the outcome.
Is it a majority of people in the legislature that have that belief in a right of privacy? It would be my impression that you don't find majorities in very many states. But Wyoming, you might.
It's a trade-off, and I'll even say I'm disappointed in some ways with the Wyoming legislature because we don't go as far as members of my select committee would like. Privacy is a government challenge because privacy trades off with government's capacity to do law enforcement and monitor and be effective, right? So you on the floor of the Wyoming Senate, countless times I've lost battles trying to increase our privacy because of that concern that, well, the old, if you've got nothing to hide, then I don't see why you need this better privacy right. That creeps me out, but it doesn't creep everybody out. And often then our law enforcement community will come and push back and say, well, we can't have this level of privacy because it'll make our jobs harder to do. They're not.
It's always that.
Yeah.
It's just you're going to make it more difficult for me to do these things.
And it's true, right? I always
absolutely.
admit to it. It's absolutely true. I am definitely trying to pass laws that end up making law enforcement's lives more difficult because privacy, to me, is a very strong, intrinsic value. It's one of the rights that we need to protect and preserve. And as I always also say, if you had no privacy, law enforcement would have an easy time doing their job. The government would be much more effective. We've all read these books and what it looks like, whether you're Gilead in Handmaid's Tale or whether you're in 1984, we know what that looks like, but they're not wrong. It's a lot easier to govern if you have no privacy. Any of the surveillance states around the world can definitely convict its criminals a lot faster than we can. So
that's it.
It's a struggle.
And watch out what you wish for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm disappointed and even disappointed with Wyoming legislators for not being more pro-privacy. All that said, relative to other states, we're obviously a more strong privacy state, and many of my colleagues are strong privacy enthusiasts. We're still on the right side of that, or on the good side of that spectrum, the pro-privacy side of that spectrum. But I would like to see us able to go further.
Are there other things that I haven't asked that are?
Well, we talked a little bit about AI. I'll just note that my select committee is working on AI now. We had some deepfake legislation that we didn't end up getting passed. I thought it was in pretty good shape. There were some concerns over freedom of expression, First Amendment type freedoms. And then there were also some concerns from big industry, and I think that helped push it over. Your very large internet-based companies, they don't like to be told what to do, and so when you try to, sometimes they push back a little. That's an area, though, where we have concern. I think deepfakes will be a big problem in the not-so-distant future. And again, infringing on your individual rights of expression by allowing others to capture who you are and replicate that and then create a false persona is a concern. Also on AI, though, there are a lot of other issues that are coming up. We'll continue monitoring them, and we're working on them now. Liability related to artificial intelligence, where you use artificial intelligence as an advisor. For example, a mental health care provider will have AI mental health care provision in the not-so-distant future. You can already probably get it. And it'll honestly be very high quality. But if something goes wrong, whose fault is it? How do you manage that? Who has liability? Those question marks are unanswered. Even a lot about...
Those are big ones.
Yeah. Even a lot about self-driving cars, legal advice, things along those lines. How do you deal with bad outcomes that are associated with AI? Those are unknown. And then we've also had a lot of discussion, obviously, about intellectual property as it relates to artificial intelligence. You've seen that in federal news. That might end up needing a federal solution, but I haven't really seen anyone doing a great bang-up job on that yet. We're still looking at it at the state level. We just don't have as much ease of control on that type of topic, but we could do something. And then perhaps bias in AI, human in charge related to AI, some of the best practices associated with AI to ensure that if it starts to go bad, you always maintain capacity to deal with that. You know, who is in charge at the end of the day is a key question. So those are some of the other things that we're working on. And if anybody wants to, we've had a few great briefings this year and last year on artificial intelligence with some of our colleagues from MIT and Stanford and around the country that have zoomed in for us and provided some good legal analyses of what the state of the art is in AI and how it might be affecting society in ways that might need to be regulated. So our wyoledge.gov website has an archive of all of that, as well as on YouTube. Those committee hearings can be watched. It's good information.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think I will take a look at that.
Great.
And have the results of your leadership in the digital realm been confirmed? Is there a growing number of companies being formed? Are you getting technology immigrants moving from other states into Wyoming?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that all happening as a result of your advanced legislative
and I
efforts?
think we're beginning, you know, when you kind of start to think of that startup curve, we're beginning to move up the acceleration ramp right now. We've got the framework. A lot of folks have heard about us. We've put in place enough pieces. We do need to get a couple of things across the finish line, and we hear clamoring of, well, if the Speedy Bank would be resolved with the Federal Reserve, we'd come and do this. And so we know there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, a lot of startups, a lot of businesses. We've had entities relocate here. And so we know it's working. I know, in Bitcoin mining alone, we've gotten millions of dollars of revenue off of sales and use tax and property tax that we wouldn't have had if we hadn't had all this effort. So if nothing else, we've gotten millions from Bitcoin mining as a state, but we know that we've created high quality financial institutions, entities that are working on coding, entities that are working on digital assets, and they're scattered all throughout the state, and that will continue to grow. So we are seeing the fruits of our labor, but I'm hopeful now over the next 2 or 3 years, we really see it ramp up. This is when I would expect things to take off. So hopefully we've got great news over the next few years.
Absolutely. The momentum the flywheel.
Exactly.
Starts.
Yep.
I guess federal legislation that would level the playing field across all states might be more of a headwind in that trend, but you've established the reputation of being out in front.
Yeah.
Imagine that's going to last for a while.
I think so, and I think the federal legislation, it'll be interesting to see exactly how that ends up playing out and whether it does level the playing field or whether we still have clear advantage. We've structured things in such a way that I feel you have to put in place a lot of what we've already put in place with or without federal legislation before you're even able to have confidence that the courts will know what the hell they're doing if you have any concerns, or that your regulators will know how to regulate a financial institution that's associated with digital assets. So I think it makes a difference, not just that the field is level, but that we have created a tremendous amount of expertise and understanding of the field and built all the rest of the pieces that surround and support it. So I think we'll be well positioned regardless.
I think that's a good point. Maybe you become the New York City of the
That's the hope.
The future financial world.
That's the hope. Absolutely. Yeah. If anyone wants to do things in digital asset space, they should be doing them in Wyoming at this point in time.
And if you enjoy the outdoors and the most beautiful state in the country.
That is correct. Yeah. You could do a lot worse than Wyoming if you want to go spend some time in some mountains.
I was fortunate enough at 16 years old to spend half of a summer in Wyoming.
Wonderful.
At a dude ranch.
Where was it at?
And wow, it was Sagan's Ranch outside of Cody. And
okay.
It was probably an hour south of Cody, I want to say.
Beautiful. Wow, yeah. Gorgeous.
Oh, man. And we did a 10-day pack trip up into the Tetons, or towards the Tetons. They were a little too far away from
Beautiful.
us. But man, it was spectacular.
Yeah,
and
that's bear country.
So I've always been in love with Wyoming
there
since then.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. Well, I'm going to get out to Wyoming at some point, and I will be sure to look you up.
Excellent. Hope so. Look forward to seeing you. Yeah, it sounds good.
Well, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you again,
Thank you so much.
Thanks for this. Appreciate it.
Take care. And thanks so much for your hard work.
Yeah, we'll keep trying. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, if you like this clip, please hit the subscribe button. You might also want to check out some of the clips I've posted with my many other guests. My interviews all address the simple question, how screwed are we? We ask experts about the problems that make Americans so pessimistic today, but we also explore why there's never been a better time to have been born than today. Join us for perspective on today's challenges and opportunities.